The world unfolds differently for each of us. Why? Where do the rules come from? Within each of us, there is a unique philosophy shaping our thoughts, beliefs, feelings, worldviews, and actions. This is Inner Dialogues with Ecem, an introspective space for curious souls and minds. This is where you get to understand your individual philosophy that writes the script of your life. This is where we unveil the inner wisdom that guides you. Yep, that was your inner sage knocking the door. Let's go and chat with him. Hi, it's Ecem. Welcome back to Inner Dialogues with me. Today I want to talk about responding and reacting. Until I studied coaching, I never thought about this difference. Let's look into these concepts together. I'll give us some scenarios to think about. Scenario 1 is called Burned Toast and Brother. You woke up quite early to prepare breakfast for yourself and your brother. You're rushing to start your day and pop 2 slices of bread in the toaster. As you wait for them, you hear your brother scrolling on TikTok or Instagram, whatever, instead of getting ready for school. This makes you feel annoyed because you're there preparing breakfast for him. You hear the timer go off and reach for the toast, only to find it's burned to a crisp. And at that very time, your brother comes into the kitchen to have breakfast. There might be different scenarios from here. You can yell at your brother about how careless he is for killing his time on social media early in the morning while you're here preparing breakfast for him. And at the end, you can throw away the toast into the sink. Or you can realize the inner fight you have created in your mind with your brother while you were waiting for the toasts, which was bottling you up against him. And when you realize the toasts were burned, you see how your anger distracted you from it. When your brother comes, you tell him about your frustration and ask for his help to prepare breakfast now with you, as well as for the next mornings, instead of being on his phone. The second scenario, which is called moaning. You are with your friend who recently had a dramatic experience with their partner, and they are moaning about how their partner is guilty. They're basically piling on the agony. And you sitting there and listening to your friend who's almost enjoying this drama and keeping to blame their partner, started to get frustrated and irritated. Here comes the riddle. You can either blurt out something insensitive like, "Get over it," due to your compiled frustration and irritation, or you can be passive aggressive about it and mildly ignore your friend for the rest of the time you're together. Or you can tell her that you hear them and share your reasons. What is the thing that made you irritated in their way of handling the situation? Scenario 3. Argument. You are in an argument with another person and they start yelling at you. Here's the riddle again. You can let them yell at you and pour the things they have inside of them to cool down. Then you state your opinion and feelings about the situation and the topic of the argument. Or you can yell back at them because they've already lost their mind. Scenario 4. Unexpected work task. Your manager assigns you a last-minute extra task. Here's the riddle once again. You moan and groan and complain about the extra burden and create a negative atmosphere and working environment for your colleagues. Or you become passive-aggressive about it and stay silent as you do the assigned task. But every time one of your colleagues come to ask you something, you give them the brush off or give a half-hearted answer. Or you inquire about the assigned task's urgency, assess your workload, and offer solutions or ask for help if needed. And last scenario 5, shopping. After a stressful and tiring day, you were scrolling on your social media and saw an ad about this air fryer, about which everyone talks and which is very popular nowadays. The ad showed how it was easy to cook and bake with it, which was definitely what you needed because you were always running short on time. Without even second guessing it, you ordered it and went on with your evening and totally forgot about it. After a couple of days, it arrived, and when your partner saw the air fryer, he said, "What have you done? We already have one sitting back in a cupboard." Or maybe he says, "What have you done? Where are we going to put this in our kitchen? It is already a tiny kitchen with no space at all." His or her question, "What have you done?" takes you back to that moment when you bought the air fryer after a stressful and tiring day where you were basically killing time on your phone. The way you bought was quite instinctive, like the second portion of lunch you ate today while you were replaying what happened in that meeting before lunch in your mind. Here comes the difference between a reaction and a response. A reaction is instinctive and impulsive. You felt an urge to buy it and you quickly went with it. There was almost no time between the urge and the action. Whereas a response requires time. It is a conscious process because we provide a time for ourselves to give reasonings for our urges and put them on a critical foundation. A response is slower than a reaction because there is a well-used time between the urge and the reaction. Creating this space requires practice and presence in our minds. It requires ways to mindfully slow down our minds and thoughts so that in difficult and impulsive situations, we will be able to slow things down and choose to respond than reacting. As I said, I wasn't aware of this distinction until my coaching studies. In the very early phases of my studies, I came across the following definition by Jay Shetty. Quote, "Responding is thoughtfully considering and then acting using cognitive skills and regulating emotions. Reacting is simply snapping back positively or negatively without careful and rational consideration or not using cognitive skills or regulating emotions." End quote. When we say to our friend, "Get over it," because we were driven by our frustration and irritation, it was us not being able to regulate our emotions and from this place reacting instead of responding. It is responding when we tell them that we hear their frustration and we share our reasons and feelings about the situation and how they handled the situation, which caused irritation and frustration within us. It is responding when we choose to let the other person yell at us and speak their mind while we wait for them to cool down and start telling our opinions and feelings. It is reacting when we yell back at them, when we try to so-called win the argument. It is reacting because we are driven by our ego without thinking about our motive for a second. It is reacting when we instinctively and compulsively purchase something or eat something without thinking, do we really need this thing at this moment? What is my purpose in buying or eating this? Deciding not to eat or buy is the second step, which comes after the deciding point of the reacting or responding phase. You can choose to buy the air fryer or eat that second portion of food, even when you're aware of your motives, which makes you able to respond this time instead of react. If you're feeling angry or bottled up, you can be aware of your emotional eating and choose to eat whatever the thing you want to eat. Instead of feeling regretful or out of control with the question, what have I done? After you give a reaction, we should ask that question when things are happening when we feel the urge to do or behave in a specific way. What am I doing right now? With what motive I'm about to do what I'm going to do? On my Instagram account, I have a series called Beyond Definition, where every Monday I share a word that ignites a spark of understanding deep within and becomes a new lens through which I see the world. This week's word was vipassana, which is a Sanskrit word meaning seeing things as they really are. It is such a basic concept, but I think it is one of the most difficult things to do as humans, because our perceptions of the world are through the lens of our opinions and feelings, which create an illusion of reality. The reality of things, people, and situations is quite different than how we really see and understand. We sometimes pollute, sometimes nourish and flourish the reality with our perceptions based on our past experiences, fears, visions for our futures, and our beliefs. And reacting, I think, is a way that distorts reality so much in a way that it makes it hard to digest and experience for us, and sometimes for the people around us. As we invest more and more into our self-development and more we do the self-inner work, we increase the amount of time we give ourselves to decide on our response. And I think one of the most prominent signs of self-growth is realizing how you are reacting differently today compared to the ways you reacted to the same situations in the past. I'm saying reacting because consciously deciding on responding and giving ourselves time to digest what we experienced is changing our hardwired conditionings and reaction patterns. The other day I realized that I used to get so sad and irritated when I lost a file or photos from my devices. Somehow, sometimes things can get deleted or distorted in time. And I remember I used to get almost haunted by the sadness and sorrow and sometimes guilt when I accidentally deleted or realized I lost photos or files that mattered to me. But recently I found myself not even feeling a tiny bit of sadness or anything when I lost a bracelet that I attributed so much meaning to. It made me remember how I spent days feeling sad and disappointed in myself to lose a pin with a Cookie Monster face on it, which was gifted to me by a dear friend of mine. My hardwired conditioning of reacting toward the concept of losing has changed. Young Pueblo, in his book Lighter, explains this difference between responding and reacting by referring to healing instead of self-growth. Quote, "Giving yourself time to witness reality without immediately reacting is a sign of progress in your healing. Now that you can see yourself and give yourself more time to process what is happening, you can more easily behave in the ways that align with your goals and honor your authenticity." End quote. Being able to give ourselves time to decide if we are gonna react or respond, and doing this for a long time and every time changes our tendency to immediately react, and in time it even heals, with his terms, the type of conditioned reaction we can give. We are prone to give. He uses specifically the word healing because of how our conditioning works. He says, quote, "Healing is needed because everything we feel leaves a mark on the mind. And it all accumulates in our conditioning. Our family dynamics, what we learned in school, our relationships with friends and partners, the views society imposes on us throughout our lives, our own relationship with ourselves, and any other experience or bit of information that passes through our being. End quote. Our conditionings are basically the lens through which we see the world, perceive things, and as a result, the way we behave. In order to behave and live as authentically and as present as we can, first we need to be aware of our conditioning. In other words, we need to shed light on them so that they don't have any places to hide in the corners of our minds and being. Then we can work to untangle these conditionings, and this is what young Pueblo calls healing. Quote, when we talk about healing and what are we actually healing from, we mean the heavy conditioning that is overloading the mind and slowing us down from living authentically. Our conditioning is literally the past that we carry with us wherever we go. End quote. Following this line of thought, I think reactions compared to responses are the voices of our conditionings. They are the voices of our past experiences and the results we got within a similar situation that happened in the past. They are the voices of our past behaviors who brought us today. Reactions are filled with baggage coming from the past. They are for survival, not for living. There's a difference between living versus surviving, right? Responses lack the baggage of the past because you decide in that moment with what you're going to move forward. The decision belongs to your present version, not to a past version of yourself. When we follow our conditionings and provide space only to our reactions, in time, in Pueblo's words, quote, these reactions harden over time and develop into specific behavior patterns that arise when the mind is reminded of a past situation. End quote. If we get irritated and frustrated when we are assigned with extra tasks at work previously, we tend to follow the same reaction and therefore behavioral pattern. Because it saved us before. Maybe we use that irritation as fuel to finish that task. Previously, if we got annoyed at our brother when he was killing time on social media instead of doing productive things or spending time with you as he promised, then when we heard him scrolling when he was supposed to get ready for school, we yell at him again. But here there is another factor. Me personally, I don't like getting up early. It is very hard for me to wake up, and in a situation like the burnt toast, if I were to yell at my brother, it would be because subconsciously I would be holding him accountable and responsible for making me wake up early. In other words, subconsciously I would be blaming him for that burnt toast. Sounds quite far-fetched, right? But as Pueblo says, quote, our ego likes to place blame outside ourselves, and often that blame falls onto those closest to us. End quote. This reminded me of a scene from an old Turkish historical drama TV series, which was translated into English as Wounded Love, which is quite irrelevant to the topic of the series and the actual title. But anyway, in this scene, there is this couple who are going through a hard time in their relationship because the girl recently lost her friend in a bombing, I believe. So each of them gives a type of monologue in this scene where the girl says, I have to be angry with someone. Otherwise, I can't handle my friend's death. Only anger can keep me going. And the boy says, if my wife needs to be a sinner, I am willing to be that sinner. blame me, be mad at me, take out all your anger against death on me. If my wife needs to be angry with me this time instead of holding on to me to survive, I'm okay with that. Now, this is too dramatic, I know, but bear with me. This is exactly how we place blame outside of ourselves, especially on the one that is closest to us. When we are dealing with a heavy emotion inside, like anger, frustration, irritation, and even passion, we look for fuel. Pueblo shares an incident that happened with him and his wife. Quote, "One day, Sarah, my wife, came into the kitchen where I was working and with a smile on her face began telling me how she had been arguing with me in her head for the last few hours. She had a lot of anger come up that day that was not triggered by anything in particular. Even so, her mind kept trying to figure out how this anger could be my fault. Her mind went back further and further in time to find a suitable reason, but in recognizing this pattern, she regained her power and the anger eventually subsided." End quote. This is the transition between a loaded, quick reaction to a constructive, conscious response. Choosing response over reaction has nothing to do with suppressing our emotions or neglecting them. It is the opposite. We sit with those emotions and find the reasons for them. And from that place, we choose our response. Let's not think about reactions as only heavy emotions like anger, hate, frustration, irritation, and many others, because I think we can work from a place of reaction even with so-called positive emotions, the ones which make us feel high, over the moon, and being able to do anything and everything. When we stumble upon a beautiful place, whether it's a view or nature, whatever that is, nowadays our most popular reaction is to snap a photo of it in order to reminisce about it and remember it in the future. We would be driven by amazement, surprise, and feelings of awe, and with that motive, we wouldn't even consciously think to stop and embrace this beauty for a second. I think this is again a difference between responding and reacting. Or let's think about a night where we celebrate your birthday or any of your achievements or any of your loved one's birthday, or maybe a summer night on a Mediterranean coast. You're feeling so happy and fulfilled at this moment. All the food and drink are amazing. You're laughing and enjoying the company of your friends. You want to experience this moment to the fullest by drinking and eating to your limits, dancing to your limits, and laughing to your limits. How lovely, right? Let's do that. Let's celebrate these moments and live the most out of them. But for a fraction of a second, if we were to think as we are about to drink our 7th glass of that beautiful cocktail, we can also think, am I doing this because I am afraid that I'm not ever going to live this kind of a moment again? Am I living the moment to the fullest, or am I behaving from a place of fear? Asking that and finding our reason and motive at that moment, and then if we want to keep on drinking, eating, whatever, we can do that. And that would be a response, not a reaction. See the pattern again? A reaction is fed from the past. If in the past I lived these moments only a couple of times due to my heavy work schedule and limited resources, whatever the reason might be, when I have a moment like this, my impulsive reaction and behavior is to go to the limits because I might never be able to experience it again. Nothing is white or black, though. What is the gray area when it comes to the difference between reacting and responding? Where does passive aggressiveness fit into? Remember, in the second scenario where you felt irritated and frustrated with your friends moaning and blaming their partner, one option there was to be passive aggressive about it, which might look like brushing her off, giving some somewhat rude answers or attitude, or being moody for the rest of the time you're spending together. Or, in the case of an argument, happened like in the third scenario between you and your friend. But let's say this time you're in a group of people in that context, your friend yelled at you, and instead of yelling at them back, you didn't say anything, but it bugged you so much. You kept replaying it inside of your mind, and as a reaction, you ignored them, you excluded them from the conversation, and you didn't refer to them or even look at them. Or in the case of being assigned an extra work task, you can stay silent for it, but inside of you, your irritation and maybe even anger can bottle up. And since you couldn't say something to your manager, you give your colleagues the brush off. These all can be examples of passive-aggressive behavior. Now, my question is, where does passive-aggressiveness stand in the spectrum of reaction versus response? I think there is no one answer here. One might be aware that they are driven by the feelings and opinions they couldn't express, and as a result, they are behaving in ways that are not solution-oriented and constructive. But also, one can become easily blinded by their ego and all the unexpressed opinions and wouldn't realize the motive of their behaviors. So again, I think it all comes back to the awareness of our motives and drives behind our behaviors, which is basically taking the time needed to decide on our response rather than going with a reaction. Once again, nothing is white or black in life. Reactions are not bad things. Bad is a concept that belongs to the human mind and the limited perception we have of this bigger systematic puzzle. We can learn a lot from our reactions if we stay mindful of them, if we reflect on them, if we question why we reacted in the way we did. We will be able to untangle our conditionings. I want to end today's conversation with a recent thing that one of my clients shared with me. For the sake of this conversation, I'll name her as Emily. Emily has a son who is 2.5 years old and who doesn't really enjoy taking baths and all the nightly routine stuff that his mother is trying to do with him. In recent weeks, when Emily was about to bath him, she filled the tub and went to another room to pick up something. When she returned back to the bathroom, she saw that her son poured a box of toys into the tub, which was filled with water. She mentioned to me at that time she was about to get angry and impatient with him because from her perspective, he was basically making the night routine go on longer. But at that very moment, she stopped and thought, what could be the worst thing that can happen? And that fraction of a second where she asked that question and went against her conditioning, she decided to go with a response that was aligned with the type of mother she wanted to be. I think this is beautiful. I think this is a sign of self-growth and even healing, as young Pueblo describes healing from our conditionings. As our conversation for today fades away, may you find your echoes of it that resonate within you. Thanks for listening today. This is Inner Dialogues with Ecem, a place where you discover your inner you, a place where you belong. Until next time, stay curious about your reactions. Take care.